Hello, I'm SA, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
A curious geometric puzzle serves as a fitting overture to the intellectual world of Oskar Perron. Imagine a cylinder, and on its surface, 2 points, one directly above the other. The task is to find the shortest path between them along the cylinder's curved face. Intuition, a guide so often reliable in Euclidean space, immediately suggests the straight, vertical line segment connecting the two. This answer is correct, yet it is profoundly incomplete. Perron demonstrated that one can construct an alternative path, a helix that winds around the cylinder an infinite number of times, whose total length is arbitrarily large. The paradox emerges here: this infinitely spiraling, far longer path can be made to lie arbitrarily close to every single point on the short, straight path. A traveler on the straight path would find the helical traveler always within sight, an infinitesimal distance away, yet their odometers would record wildly divergent journeys. This problem, which became known as the Perron paradox, reveals the essential character of its author's mathematical mind. It shows a deep-seated suspicion of the obvious, a delight in the counterintuitive, and a relentless drive to expose the rigorous, often strange, truths that hide beneath a veneer of geometric simplicity. This same intellectual impulse, this compulsion to re-examine and rebuild foundational ideas with greater power and generality, would lead Perron to one of his most significant achievements, a profound reformulation of the integral, the very engine of calculus. His work in this area sought to resolve a subtle but deep crisis brewing within the heart of mathematical analysis at the turn of the 20th century. The theory of the integration, as bequeathed by Bernhard Riemann, was a monumental achievement. Its conception of the definite integral as the limit of the sum of areas of infinitesimally thin rectangles was intuitive, powerful, and perfectly suited for the continuous and piecewise continuous functions that dominated physics and engineering. Yet, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, mathematicians were exploring a far wilder universe of functions. The set theory of Georg Cantor had opened a Pandora's box of pathological objects, functions that defied easy visualization. The canonical example was the Dirichlet function, which takes the value 1 on the rational numbers and 0 on the irrationals. Between any 2 points on the number line, this function flickers between its two values with infinite frequency. For such a function, Riemann's method of partitioning the domain collapses. The upper and lower sums of the rectangular areas never converge, and the Riemann integral fails to exist. The analytical toolkit of the era required a more powerful instrument. The breakthrough came from Henry Lebesgue in 1902. His solution was one of breathtaking conceptual originality. Where Riemann had partitioned the domain, the x-axis, into small intervals, Lebesgue partitioned the range, the y-axis. He grouped together all the points in the domain where the function took on similar values, measured the size of these sets using his new theory of measure, and then summed the results. This approach attained a vast new class of discontinuous functions, including the Dirichlet function, and in doing so, laid the foundations for modern measure theory, probability theory, and functional analysis. Its power was undeniable. Still, this power came with a certain intellectual trade-off. The Lebesgue integral, while supreme in its generality, was built upon a highly abstract and non-constructive framework. Its definition felt distant from the elementary ideas of calculus. For many, its application lacked the direct, constructive feel of Riemann's sums. A more unsettling issue arose concerning the relationship between differentiation and integration, a relationship codified in the fundamental theorem of calculus. While Lebesgue's theory preserved this cornerstone theorem in many respects, it revealed a fissure. There existed differentiable functions whose derivatives, while defined everywhere, were so oscillatory that they fell outside the scope of Lebesgue's method. The beautiful symmetry, where integration perfectly reverses differentiation, was broken. A function could have a derivative, yet that derivative could be unintegrable, even by the powerful machinery of Lebesgue. It was into this sophisticated and unsettled landscape that Perron introduced his own definition of the integral in his 1914 paper, Über den Integralbegriff. His approach was startling in its elegance and its return to first principles. He sought to define the integral of a function f by trapping it. He imagined a class of well-behaved, differentiable functions, which he called majorants. A function m is a majorant for f on an interval from a to b if its derivative, m prime of x, is always greater than or equal to f of x throughout the interval. Similarly, a minorant function m is one whose derivative, m prime of x, is always less than or equal to f of x. The core idea is a sophisticated squeeze. One considers all possible majorant functions and finds the smallest possible value that m of b can take. This value is the infimum of the set of all m of b. Symmetrically, one considers all possible minorant functions and finds the largest possible value that m of b can take, the supremum. If these two values, the floor from below and the ceiling from above, coincide, then the function f is declared to be Perron integrable, and their common value is its integral. The ingenuity of this method is manifold. It sidesteps the complexities of measure theory entirely, relying only on the familiar concepts of derivatives and bounds from elementary calculus. It is, in spirit, a direct appeal to the fundamental theorem of calculus, defining the integral by its relationship to antiderivatives. This approach proved to be astonishingly powerful. The Perron integral includes every function integrable by Riemann's method, and, remarkably, every function integrable by Lebesgue's. Its scope was even wider. It successfully integrated those problematic derivatives that had eluded Lebesgue, thereby restoring the full, intuitive force of the fundamental theorem. If a function f possesses a derivative f at every point, then the Perron integral of f from a to b is simply f of b minus f over. The symmetry was restored. Perron was working within a fertile intellectual climate. A French mathematician, Arnaud Denjoy, proceeding from a completely different direction involving transfinite induction to piece together local integrals, developed his own generalized integral that proved equivalent to Perron's. The simultaneous emergence of these two equivalent, yet methodologically distinct, theories signaled that the time was right for such a synthesis. Their collective work formed a new, higher theory of integration. The legacy of this contribution extends directly into the modern teaching and understanding of analysis. Decades later, the mathematicians Ralph Henstock and Jaroslav Kurzweil, building explicitly on the ideas of Perron and Denjoy, formulated what is now known as the Henstock-Kurzweil or gauge integral. This definition elegantly refines Riemann's original idea of sums, but allows the width of the partitioning intervals to vary according to a gauge, a function that captures the local behavior of the integrand. This seemingly small modification is sufficient to create an integral with all the power of Perron's construction, yet with a definition that looks remarkably like an introductory calculus textbooks. For this reason, some advocate for the gauge integral as the definitive version, the one that provides the most direct and powerful path to the fundamental theorem. In this modern formulation, the spirit of Perron's insight of tenningness behaved functions through carefully controlled local bounds finds its ultimate, refined expression. His work on integration was a profound act of intellectual restoration, shoring up the very foundations of analysis. This same desire to find deep structure and order within seemingly chaotic systems would soon lead him to another monumental undertaking, this time within the intricate world of number theory and the endless architecture of continued fractions. The same intellectual impulse that drove the reconstruction of the integral a desire to uncover deep, unifying structures within apparently unruly mathematical systems guided Oskar Perron toward another monumental undertaking. His attention turned from the continuum of the real line to the discrete, intricate architecture of the rational numbers and their relationship with the irrationals. This journey led him deep into the world of number theory, specifically to the elegant and profound theory of continued fractions. Here, he would erect a cathedral of knowledge, a work so comprehensive it would define the field for half a century. The allure of continued fractions is ancient and powerful. At its heart lies a fundamental question of Diophantine approximation. How closely can an irrational number, a number like pi or the square root of 2 whose decimal expansion is infinite and non-repeating, be shadowed by a simple fraction? A continued fraction provides a uniquely beautiful and algorithmic answer. It unravels an irrational number into a sequence of integers that, when assembled, generate the very best possible rational approximations. For example, the golden ratio, 1 plus the square root of 5 all divided by 2, as the simplest and most perfect continued fraction of all an endless sequence of the integer 1. This process, refined by the likes of Leonhard Euler and Joseph Louis Lagrange, felt like a form of mathematical divination, revealing the hidden rational soul of any real number. It was a complete, elegant, and deeply satisfying theory for a single dimension. A far more formidable challenge, however, loomed in higher dimensions. The magnificent machinery of continued fractions broke down when one attempted to generalize it. The central, unsolved problem was one of simultaneous Diophantine approximation. How could one find a sequence of rational numbers, all sharing a common denominator, that best approximates a whole set of irrational numbers at once? Imagine trying to find a single denominator q such that the fractions p sub 1 over q, p sub 2 over q, and so on, provide an optimal approximation for a vector of numbers like, say, the cube root of 2, and the cube root of 4. The one-dimensional algorithm offered no clear path forward. The German mathematician Carl Gustav Jacob Jacobi had, in the mid-19th century, proposed an ingenious generalization, an algorithm that seemed to do for vectors what the classical algorithm did for single numbers. Yet Jacobi's idea remained a tantalizing but isolated curiosity. It lacked a comprehensive theoretical framework, its properties were poorly understood, and it existed as a clever procedure without a body of established theorems to give it context and power. The field was a collection of fascinating puzzles and desperate results awaiting a grand unifying architect. Perron became that architect. His response to this intellectual void was the colossal 2-volume treatise, Die Lehre von den Kettenbrüchen, or The Theory of Continued Fractions, with its first edition appearing in 1913. This work was a landmark of mathematical scholarship. It was a systematic synthesis, a complete reformulation, and vast extension of everything known about the subject. Perron gathered the scattered threads of Euler, Lagrange, Jacobi, and countless others, weaving them into a coherent and formidable tapestry. He clarified ambiguous definitions, proved new theorems, and provided a common language and notation that would standardize the field for generations of number theorists. Perron's book became the definitive and indispensable reference, the card of final appeal on all matters related to continued fractions. Its sheer two-type thoroughness could be daunting, yet its intellectual authority was absolute. Central to this grand synthesis was Perron's formalization and deep investigation of the very mechanism Jacobi had sketched out. What is now known as the Jacobi-Perron algorithm became a cornerstone of Perron's work. He established its fundamental properties and explored its behavior with characteristic rigor. The algorithm itself is a thing of abstract beauty. It takes a vector of n real numbers as its input and, through an iterative process of taking integer parts and inverting remainders, generates a sequence of integer matrices. The power of the algorithm lies in the products of these matrices. As one multiplies more and more of them together, the columns of the resulting matrix yield sequences of simultaneous rational approximations to the original vector of numbers. It is the direct, multidimensional analog of the classical algorithm, a dance of integers in high-dimensional space that systematically hunts for the best rational shadows of an irrational vector. The influence of Die Lehre von den Kettenbrüchen was immediate and enduring. It shaped the research agenda in Diophantine approximation for decades. Any serious student or researcher in the field was required to master Perron's text. Its impact is seen clearly in the work of subsequent giants. The great Soviet mathematician Alexander Kinchin, whose own monograph Continued Fractions became a classic in its own right, built his treatment squarely upon the foundations Perron had laid. Likewise, the Cambridge number theorist J.W.S. Cassels, a leading figure in the mid-20th century, operated within the framework that Perron's book had established. Perron had provided the essential language and the foundational results from which new, deeper questions could be asked. The structures Perron so meticulously documented continue to resonate in modern mathematics and technology. The theory of continued fractions is a fundamental tool in the contemporary study of dynamical systems and fractal geometry. Its applications also surface in surprising and critical areas. In cryptography, for instance, a famous vulnerability in the RSA encryption scheme, known as Wiener's attack, relies entirely on the properties of continued fractions. If an RSA private key is inadvertently chosen to be too small, an attacker can use the public key to compute a continued fraction expansion that will, with alarming efficiency, reveal the secret private key. This provides a stark example of how deep structural number theory, the kind Perron consolidated, has direct and potent consequences in the digital world. His work was an act of profound intellectual organization, bringing a beautiful but wild corner of mathematics under a unified and powerful system of laws. This same instinct for locating hidden order within a complex structure would soon lead him to one of his most celebrated and widely applied discoveries, this time within the algebraic domain of matrices, where a particular class of arrays held the key to understanding stability, growth, and equilibrium across science. The same instinct for locating hidden order within a complex structure would soon lead him to one of his most celebrated and widely applied discoveries, this time within the algebraic domain of matrices, where a particular class of arrays held the key to understanding stability, growth, and equilibrium across science. The world of linear algebra in the early 20th century was a sprawling landscape. The general theory of matrices, developed by figures like Cayley and Sylvester, dealt with arrays of real or complex numbers, and their spectral theory, the study of their eigenvalues and eigenvectors, was a realm of beautiful but often bewildering complexity. Eigenvalues could be real or complex, distinct or repeated, and their associated eigenvectors could point in any direction within a vector space. Within this vast universe, Perron identified a seemingly simple, yet profoundly consequential, subclass, matrices whose every single entry is a positive real number. The question he posed, implicitly, was one of structure and predictability. What special properties emerge when a matrix is constrained by this condition of universal positivity? Does this restriction impose a kind of order on the otherwise unruly behavior of eigenvalues? His investigation culminated in a 1907 paper that stands as a landmark of linear algebra. In it, Perron demonstrated something extraordinary. For any square matrix with strictly positive entries, there exists a unique eigenvalue that is real, positive, and strictly larger in absolute value than any other eigenvalue of the matrix. This dominant eigenvalue has since become known as the Perron root or the Perron-Frobenius eigenvalue. Furthermore, he proved that the eigenvector corresponding to the special eigenvalue is also unique up to scaling, and possesses the remarkable quality of having all its components be strictly positive. This is the Perron vector. The result was stunning in its elegance and power. It guaranteed that for any system describable by positive matrix, there is a single, dominant, stable state. The positivity of the eigenvector's components implied that this state involves a positive contribution from every element of the system, while the dominance of the eigenvalue ensured the state would eventually overwhelm all other modes of behavior. Perron had found a mathematical guarantee of a unique, positive equilibrium lurking within any system governed by positive interactions. This discovery immediately captured the attention of the great Berlin mathematician Ferdinand Georg Frobenius, a master of algebra and group theory. Frobenius recognized the deep significance of Perron's result and saw how its power could be amplified. Between 1908 and 1912, in a series of brilliant papers, Frobenius undertook a powerful generalization. He extended Perron's conclusions from the restrictive class of strictly positive matrices to a much broader family of non-negative matrices, those whose entries are greater than or equal to zero. This required a more subtle condition, which he identified as irreducibility. In graph-theoretic terms, a matrix is irreducible if the directed graph associated with it is strongly connected, meaning one can get from any node to any other node. For this wider class of irreducible non-negative matrices, Frobenius proved that Perron's conclusions essentially hold that there is still a unique, positive, dominant eigenvalue and a corresponding positive eigenvector. This combined achievement is what we today call the Perron-Frobenius theorem, a tool of immense practical utility. Its most famous modern application is one that billions of people use daily, often without a second thought: Google's PageRank algorithm, the original foundation of its search engine. The worldwide web can be modeled as an immense directed graph where web pages are nodes and hyperlinks are the directed edges connecting them. This structure can be represented by a colossal matrix, where an entry S sub edge is positive if page J links to page I. After some modifications to handle dangling pages and to ensure irreducibility, this becomes a stochastic matrix whose spectral properties are governed by the Perron-Frobenius theorem. The page rank of every page on the web is determined by the components of the principal eigenvector, the Perron vector of this massive matrix. The theorem guarantees that such an eigenvector exists, is unique, and has all positive components, which can be interpreted as a measure of each page's importance or authority. A higher value in the Perron vector corresponds to a higher page rank. The stability and uniqueness promised by Perron's mathematics are precisely what allow for a coherent and stable ranking of the entire internet. The theorem's reach extends deep into other disciplines. In economics, the Nobel laureate Mosley Learney developed his input-output model to analyze the interdependencies between different sectors of a national economy. This model uses a matrix where each entry as subedge represents the amount of output from industry I required as input for industry J. This is a non-negative matrix, and if the economy is interconnected, it is irreducible. The Perron-Frobenius theorem applies directly. The Perron vector gives the relative output levels of each industry required for the economy to be in a state of balanced growth. The Perron eigenvalue itself corresponds to the growth factor of the economy. The theorem provides a mathematical foundation for understanding economic equilibrium and planning. A similar structure, the Leslie matrix, is used in mathematical biology to model the growth of age-structured populations, with a Perron eigenvalue determining the population's long-term growth rate and the Perron vector describing the stable age distribution. Through this singular achievement, Perron provided a powerful bridge connecting abstract algebra to the concrete dynamics of complex systems. He demonstrated how a simple, elegant constraint positivity could reveal profound truths about ranking, economic balance, and population stability. This search for definitive, foundational truths, for guarantees of order amidst apparent chaos, was a defining feature of his mathematical intellect. He would apply the same drive for certainty to an entirely different field, the analysis of differential equations, where the very existence of a solution was a question that demanded a new and powerful method of proof. This search for definitive, foundational truths, for guarantees of order amidst apparent chaos, was a defining feature of his mathematical intellect. He would apply the same drive for certainty to an entirely different field, the analysis of differential equations, where the very existence of a solution was a question that demanded a new and powerful method of proof. The world of differential equations at the turn of the 20th century was a domain of immense power and profound uncertainty. These equations, which describe the relationship between a function and its rates of change, formed the very language of physics, engineering, and celestial mechanics. Yet, for a vast and important class of them, particularly those with nonlinear behavior, finding an explicit symbolic solution was an impossibility. This created a deep intellectual anxiety. While an equation might perfectly model a physical system, one could have little confidence in its predictions, without a guarantee that a well-behaved solution even existed. The prevailing tool for establishing such a guarantee was the Picard-Lindelöf theorem, a landmark achievement that built upon the earlier foundational work of Augustin Louis Cauchy and Rudolf Lipschitz. While Picard's method was constructive, it produced a sequence of functions through iteration which, under specific conditions, would converge to the true solution. The strength of Picard's approach was also its primary constraint. It required the function defining the differential equation to satisfy the so-called Lipschitz condition, a strict requirement of smoothness that essentially limits how fast the function can change. Many differential equations arising from physical or geometric problems, however, possess singularities or other behaviors that violate this condition. For these cases, Picard's elegant iterative machinery would fail, leaving the question of existence unanswered. The mathematical community needed an alternative pathway, a method that could secure the existence of a solution without relying on a convergent sequence, a method that could handle a broader, more unruly class of functions. It was Oskar Perron who provided such a pathway in his 1915 paper, a work of profound elegance titled Eine neue Existenzbeweis für die Integral der differential gleichen y prime equals f of x, y. His approach was conceptually revolutionary. He sidestepped the entire apparatus of iterative approximation. His method was one of confinement, a brilliant application of analytical reasoning that proves a solution exists by trapping it between two other, more manageable functions. This became known as the method of upper and lower solutions, or the method of majorants and minorants. The idea is as beautiful as it is powerful. To prove the existence of a solution to the equation y prime equals f of x, y passing through a point, one searches for two auxiliary functions. The first is a supersolution, a function we might call u of x, which everywhere grows at least as fast as the differential equation prescribes. Formally, its derivative, u prime of x, must be greater than or equal to f of x, u of x. The second is a subsolution, v of x, which everywhere grows at most as fast as the equation dictates, meaning its derivative, v prime of x, is less than or equal to f of x, v of x. Perron's genius was to demonstrate that if one can construct such a pair of bounding functions, and if the subsolution v of x consistently remains below the supersolution u of x within a given interval, then at least one true solution to the original differential equation must exist. Threaded between them, the solution y of x is guaranteed to satisfy the inequality v of x is less than or equal to y of x is less than or equal to u of x. It is a proof of existence by suffocation. The solution is squeezed into being. This method offers a profound philosophical shift. It moves from a constructive, algorithmic proof to an existential one. It provides absolute certainty of a solution's presence without necessarily providing a direct recipe for its calculation. This technique proved exceptionally versatile, succeeding in many cases where the Lipschitz condition failed. It was particularly adept at handling boundary value problems, where conditions are specified at two different points, a scenario that posed considerable difficulty for iterative methods. The intellectual lineage is clear. Perron operated within the grand tradition of existence theory established by Cauchy, Lipschitz, and Picard. He acknowledged their monumental contributions, yet his work offered a completely different angle of attack. It was a geometric and topological argument couched in the language of analysis, one that relied on the properties of continuous functions and the structure of the real number line. The influence of this method was both immediate and lasting. It became the standard and indispensable tool in the qualitative theory of differential equations, a field concerned with understanding the behavior of solutions without finding their explicit form. His colleague at Munich, the formidable Konstantin Theodori, whose own work pushed the frontiers of the calculus of variations in measure theory, recognized the power of Perron's approach. The concept of super and subsolutions was generalized and adapted, becoming fundamental to the study of partial differential equations, where it helps establish the existence of solutions to complex models in physics and engineering. Today, Perron's method remains a vibrant and essential part of the mathematical toolkit. It is a staple of graduate-level courses, providing students with one of their first encounters with a non-constructive existence proof of deep utility. In advanced research, it forms a cornerstone for proving the existence of specialized solutions, such as traveling waves in reaction diffusion equations, which model phenomena like flame propagation or the spread of biological populations. It is also a key technique in bifurcation theory. The study of how the qualitative structure of solutions changes as a parameter in the system is varied. Perron's method allows mathematicians to prove that new solutions branch off from old ones at critical thresholds. This contribution to analysis reveals a consistent intellectual signature. Whether defining a new integral by squeezing it between upper and lower sums, or proving the existence of a function by trapping it between a majorant and a minorant, Perron's instinct was to establish certainty through bounds. He was a master of the inequality, a mathematician who found order and structure by carefully controlling the space in which a solution could live. The Perron-Frobenius theorem confines the most significant eigenvalue of a positive matrix. His method for differential equations confines the solution function itself. This relentless pursuit of analytical rigor and elegant, definitive structures provides a powerful lens through which to view his entire mathematical output. It also sets up a profound and challenging contrast when considering the world beyond his theorems, a world of political upheaval and moral compromise where such clean, unambiguous bounds were seldom available. This unifying intellectual thread, this deep-seated instinct for establishing certainty through containment weaves through the entirety of Perron's mathematical tapestry. His work, viewed from the synthetic perspective, becomes a grand project in the art of the bound. The Perron integral, which elegantly sidesteps the measure-theoretic machinery of Lebesgue, finds its definition by squeezing a function between a family of majorant and minorant functions. His profound investigations into continued fractions are, at their core, a study in how to best trap irrational numbers within a sequence of ever-improving rational approximations. The celebrated Perron-Frobenius theorem performs a similar feat within linear algebra, isolating the dominant eigenvalue of a positive matrix within a specific, predictable domain. His method for differential equations, with its upper and lower solutions, quite literally fences in the unknown function, guaranteeing its existence and uniqueness within a defined corridor. This consistent methodological approach reveals a mind obsessed with structure, control, and the power of inequalities to bring order to the infinite. He was an architect of logical enclosures, a mathematician who believed that truth could be cornered, bounded, and ultimately revealed. This profound commitment to finding elegant, definitive structures within mathematics creates a stark and illuminating counterpoint to the chaotic political landscape He was compelled to navigate Perron's long tenure at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich spanned the Weimar Republic, the rise of the Third Reich, and the post-war reconstruction of Germany. His career during the Nazi period, particularly his service as the university's rector from 1938 to 1940, places him at the center of one of modern science's most troubling ethical crucibles. His was a path of the conservative German academic elite, a path characterized by deep-seated nationalism, a reverence for the state, and a belief in the primacy of German culture, all of which made him susceptible to the regime's initial appeals. His inaugural address as rector, delivered in the shadow of the Anschluss, was replete with pledges of the university's service to the Führer and Reich, framing academic work as a contribution to the national project. Yet, his actions were a complex tapestry of accommodation and quiet resistance. He was a product of an older, authoritarian academic tradition and viewed with suspicion the politicized, often anti-intellectual fervor of the Nazi student organizations and some party functionaries. His correspondence reveals efforts to uphold certain standards of mathematical rigor against ideological incursions. He navigated a treacherous environment alongside colleagues like the esteemed Konstantin Kara-Theodori, another towering figure in Munich who adopted his own strategy of professional survival, focusing intensely on his work while making necessary public concessions. Their shared world was one of whispered conversations and calculated compromises. Perron's experience stands in contrast to figures like Wilhelm Suess at Freiburg, who, while also operating within the system, skillfully used his position in the German Mathematical Society to protect the discipline and lay the clandestine groundwork for the Mathematicians for Schutzensted at Oberwolfach, a beacon of international mathematical collaboration that would blossom after the war. Perron's choices were different. He saw his duty as the preservation of his university's academic core, a goal that led him to make compromises that remain deeply uncomfortable to examine. His story is a powerful case study in the immense pressure exerted upon scientists in a totalitarian state, where the clear boundaries of mathematical proof give way to the murky, perilous terrain of political survival and moral ambiguity. The fall of the regime brought a period of denazification and professional reckoning. Perron, despite his rectorship, was ultimately classified as a follower and was able to resume his academic career, continuing to teach and publish into his 70s. His final decades were spent solidifying his immense contributions, particularly through the continued revision of his authoritative textbooks on algebra and analysis. These volumes, clear, comprehensive, and demanding, shaped generations of German-speaking mathematicians, cementing his pedagogical influence long after his research prime. Looking back across the sweep of his long life, we are faced with that dual legacy. One part is etched in the permanent language of mathematics. Here, Perron is a foundational figure. The Perron-Frobenius theorem has experienced a remarkable afterlife far beyond the confines of pure matrix theory. It forms the mathematical bedrock of Google's original PageRank algorithm, which revolutionized information retrieval by treating the entire web as a colossal matrix and finding its principal eigenvector. It is essential to the input-output models used in economics, pioneered by Wassily Learndief to analyze the interdependence of industries. In population biology, it describes the stable age distribution of a species. His work provides an invisible, yet indispensable scaffolding for our modern technological and economic world. The other part of his legacy is historical, a cautionary narrative about the complex entanglement of science and power. His career serves as a potent and disquieting example of how intellectual eminence offers little protection from the corrupting influence of a totalitarian state. It forces a reflection on the responsibilities of the scholar and the fragility of academic integrity in the face of overwhelming political pressure. The man who sought absolute certainty and elegant, unambiguous structures in his mathematical proofs lived a professional life defined by their very absence. Oskar Perron's story is therefore one of monumental achievement and profound complexity, leaving us with a collection of theorems of exquisite clarity and a historical record that serves as a permanent reminder of the deep ambiguities that arise when the pristine world of pure thought collides with the unforgiving realities of history.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.